Good evening. My name is Melvin Adams. I'm the president of Noah Webster Educational Foundation, and we are delighted to have you join us tonight for this panel. Tonight, the focus of our panel is the role of government in education. And so we're excited about that, and I hope that you get a lot of helpful information by the end of the evening. Audience, I'd like to just let you know that you may, if you have a question that you'd like to submit to us, submit to our panel, you may do that by texting this number, 877-322-NWEF. That's 877-322-NWEF. Now, about our panel this evening, our panel is made up of both state and local elected officials here in Virginia. They all serve in positions where they were directly elected by voters. And so tonight we have with us Delegate Charles Poindexter of the Virginia House of Delegates. We have Councilman Jeff Helgeson of the Lynchburg City Council. And we have Jason Johnson, who is chairman of the Bedford County Public School Board. Now, welcome, panel. So glad to have all of you with us. And I would like to just each of you take about 30 seconds or so and tell us just a little bit more about yourself. Delegate Poindexter, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Charlie Poindexter from Franklin County, sixth generation there, producer farmer, and my professional career was IT with DOD, and the last 22 years I've spent 8 in local government and 14 in the General Assembly of Virginia, where I've dealt with school budgets and education budgets in both cases, and especially at the state level as chair of the House Appropriations Subcommittee dealing with compensation and retirement and benefits.
And I'm Jeff Helgeson. I've been elected in Lynchburg City Council since 2004. My background is finance and financial planning, so I help the city try to live within its means, and I also teach a little bit at the college level, teach corporate finance.
Very good.
And my name is Jason Johnson. I'm actually a product of the Bedford County Public School System, K through 12 right here. I was elected to the school board in 2012, and I have the great honor of representing many of the same schools that I attended myself when I was here. My life is dedicated to education in addition to my work on the school board. I also work in higher education in a classroom with students almost every day myself.
Very good. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Kind of to help set the tone for our conversation, we're going to watch a video clip that we carry on our website. Really talks about the role of government in education, just kind of throws out some thoughts there. And so let's roll that tape.
Creativity and innovation are natural results of learning. Social stability and strong economies depend on it. So, it is in a government's best interest that every member of society is well educated. However, it is not in the best interest of citizens when the government controls their only source of educational opportunities. In most industries, there are regulations imposed by antitrust laws at both the state and federal level. These regulations control the organization and conduct of business in order to promote competition for the benefit of consumers. Regardless of the product, monopoly tends to decrease quality and increase cost, while diversity and competition almost always result in better goods, services, and prices from all providers. What improvements might we see if these principles and laws were applied to the field of education? To learn more, visit nwef.org.
So I have 2 goals for our conversation tonight. First goal is to generally help our viewers understand government's role in education. The responsibilities, the processes, and so forth. We're really going to focus on K-12 education tonight. Each of you, I know, have unique roles in that sphere and in that process, and so you're going to have opportunity to talk to us about those. The second one really is to address questions that many people have today. And it really sums up in this: when things are going wrong in education, how can they engage to ensure that the problems get fixed? So we partner with citizens to serve them and their families. And so as we get started tonight, let's start with responsibilities and processes. I recently did an interview with a Mrs. Debbie Terhar, who is the recent chairman of the State Board of Education in the state of Ohio. She speaks to some very important matters that I believe will help us and help to further our conversation tonight, help set a little broader platform for that. And so let's listen to that conversation now.
How does the state board relate to the federal Department of Education, to the executive and legislative branches of state government, and to local and regional school boards? Now, I realize you're talking from Ohio, and this will vary somewhat from state to state, but in general, it will apply.
Right. So the State Board of Education really doesn't have anything to do with the Federal Department of Education. Federal dollars are passed through the State Department of Education. So that's the only contact we have with the feds. The feds had their mandates. They have testing requirements, all those other things that they bring down from the federal level. That all goes through the department, and you have your bureaucrats at the department who handle all of those things. And that's why it's very important for the State Board of Education to hire a very good superintendent of public instruction, because that person is the one who implements all of these programs and plans and does the pass-through dollars. The executive branch drives its own priorities. We are not a member of the executive branch. I work very closely with Governor Kasich on early childhood, and it was a fabulous thing. But it was not something where he directed what we did.
Yeah.
He worked closely with his appointees, so they brought things to the table, which were considered, and quite often we would agree, and quite often we wouldn't. So it was a good thing. The board works with the legislature on education policy. I was very privileged to be married to a state legislator who was in the legislature at the time. So I developed a very good rapport with the state legislators, both the House. My husband was also in the Senate, and I work very closely with the senators, and I still enjoy that today. I have a very close relationship with them today, and we do discuss education issues for that. Local and regional boards, we are a local control state. So the local boards are in charge of the curriculum that they provide for their students. Of course, that has to go along with the standards that the state mandates be followed. So I think it all works very nicely in Ohio. Regarding curriculum, we have a model curriculum that was developed by the Department of Education for Ohio. And so it serves as a model for the district to look to. It's not set in stone. That's not what they have to do. It's just what you can do if you wish to do that. But it's also at the local level. They're responsible for the materials that they purchase to provide instruction to the children. And that really is the key. Yeah. It's the actual instructional materials that you present to a child that develops their education. Yeah. So that's where parents, in my mind, come in. Parents need to review the educational curriculum materials that their children are provided, and need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, because unfortunately there are so many things that are printed today that are inappropriate for children to be exposed to. And that's my feeling, but I've seen it. And you know when it's right and you know when it's not.
Yeah.
All right, so that makes a nice transition. Let's transition from that conversation back into this one. And I think she made a statement that's very important as she was talking about Ohio's education. She said that we are a local control state. And so let's carry that over to our conversation tonight. Not all states are local control states. So let's clarify that distinction. Since all of you serve here in Virginia, you are all regulated under the Virginia Constitution, and of course, education in this Commonwealth is regulated under Article 8. And so here's the question I have for all of you. Is Virginia a local control state?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Adams. In my mind, I would say mostly. We go back to 1971, when the Virginia Constitution was modernized, and it does call for public education, which is generally supported, I think, across the board. But the words in the Constitution, what they mean, and how they've changed the meaning over the years, I think is a little different in my perspective. Our Department of Education is appointed by the governor, and like Ohio does a lot in the terms of curriculum, but I gather from the clip that ours does more in the way of curriculum, guidance, policy, and what local school boards should do. And occasionally that sort of gets political, since the governor appoints the Department of Education in first 2 or 3 levels inside of that. Now, our legislature does have a role in policy, and legislation is enacted from time to time, and policies that the DOE and the school boards will follow. The principal role, however, is supposed to be dollars, money, and in Virginia, it's supposed to be about a 50-50 split between the local government and the state of Virginia. Now, that's for what we call standards of quality positions only that are directly related to education. It doesn't include a lot of the support staff, or maybe bus drivers and things like that. So that's always an issue. And whenever the state, for example, issues raises, the locals have to provide a match for those salaries and that type thing. Virginia does not construct facilities normally. In the past, there have been pots of monies that local governments can access to build facilities. But at the current time, that's really nothing available out there right now.
So, Mr. Poindexter, let me just interject here real quick. So, you said mostly it is. Article 7, or Article 8, Section 7, talks specifically about school boards, and it says this: the supervision of schools in each school division shall be vested in a school board to be composed of members selected in the manner, for the term, possessing the qualifications, and to the number provided by law. So does that kind of implies that the supervision, the oversight, the directive goes to that school board, or is
Absolutely.
that a limited?
But there are points where the legislature have put requirements on the schools in the way of laws and testing and all sorts of things, as well as through the power of the purse. So we've had a sort of amorphous over the years to where it's become more centralized, is what I'm trying to say. Okay.
Somebody else want to speak to that?
Yeah, in Lynchburg, what we do is we have a power of the purse as well, the Lynchburg City Council. We actually have currently appointed school board members who are in charge of the school. So it should be done at the local level, and it should be done by the appointed school board members. Lots of times what happens, that kind of gets punted, because they kind of delegate as the appointed school board member. What does the professional bureaucrat think? What does the superintendent think? And we'll do that. And sometimes the superintendent says, well, The state says you must do this, so therefore we do it. So they kind of punt a lot of times. And you know, we share the money as the delegate stated. You know, we're about 60-40 as far as funding schools. 60% comes from the state because Lynchburg is a poorer community. The rest of the money, a lot more than's required under the standards of quality, are provided by the local taxpayers. And they're, you know, but when you get a volunteer kind of position, lots of times there's a lot of punting that happens. You know, I'd like to see a lot more accountability by our school board members of the bureaucrats and the superintendent. I think with that, we'd go a lot further.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you believe that the local school boards need to hold the bureaucrats. Is that what I'm hearing you say? You think school boards need to hold the bureaucrats more accountable rather than just letting them make all the decisions and go with it?
Absolutely. They're there to represent, you know, they actually represent city council since we appointed them.
Right.
And we appointed them so they can represent the parents and those that are wanting and to fulfill their mission of having a quality education. And the more you get into that and the more that punting goes on, and the more that you just delegate that to the expert, if you will, you kind of lose a lot. You lose a lot of what the quality is for the actual student. You lose a lot for what happens with the quality of the teacher actually having to teach when they have new rules that come into play here and there and yonder because somebody else said it from afar. And so it should be done locally, and we should be able to compete with Bedford. We should be able to compete with Campbell County because that's who we're competing with. If we have good local decisions and have good local public schools, maybe we can do better than Bedford, or maybe we can do better than Campbell and the neighboring counties.
Mr. Johnson, why don't you speak to that? You're a school board member here in Bedford County, and talk to us from your perspective.
Sure. No, I would actually agree with Delegate Poindexter in that it mostly is local, and certainly the issues that we deal with can vary sometimes, whether it's a local issue or more of a state issue. Unlike Ohio, Virginia is a Dillon Rule state, so local governments can only exercise certain powers that are given to us directly by the state government. And so with standards of quality that kind of give us a framework for how many teachers we should have per number of students, the standards of learning that tell us, you know, what content should be taught in classes, and that there will be testing and accountability for those. There are some things that locally we just can't handle. That having been said, you know, our school boards are basically given three main functions: selecting and evaluating a superintendent, passing a budget, and setting policy. So those things are very much within our wheelhouse. Those are the things that a lot of local school boards work very hard to try to manage. And then the day-to-day operations of the school system are vested with the superintendent and his or her staff.
Okay. Let's take just a few more minutes and dive just a little bit deeper. Just briefly, though, Delegate Poindexter. So you served in the Virginia House, have for some time. You've been a Board of Supervisors member, and so again, you've already said that you do a lot of the work related to finances. That's really what you guys do. Is there anything beyond that the House of Delegates particularly does, or maybe the Senate side does, that you could speak to? Just for clarification on roles and process for our listeners who are trying to understand, how does this complex system work? Because it all kind of leans into each other, and if we can, we're not going to get it all done tonight, but let's try at least to introduce.
Well, remember that Virginia is a mother country. Okay, so budgets are, while the governor proposes a budget in Virginia in the fall, the legislature disposes of it. Meaning it doesn't look very much the same when it comes out the door. And so the legislature, including the Senate, we get the request from the governor, and then we get the request from all the counties and the cities and the towns and the lobbyists, the NEA, and then the BEA, and the Superintendent's Association, and so forth and so on. And we have to look to see what money we have, and that's how we actually come up with the amount of money, although there are formulas involved. there's something called the composite index, which people really need to know about, and it's a formula that where the state sends direct aid to each school division based on their ability to pay. And believe me, in rural Virginia and right here, we get a lot more out of that formula than in Northern Virginia, although they get some supplements. So we have to be careful how we open the door to revising the composite index. But the process is the same. The General Assembly comes up with a budget at the end of the session, and the governor does get to propose some changes to it, but basically the budget is driven by the House of Delegates with the Senate concurrence and input, strong input, I might say. So that's sort of the money side, but there's still legislation that can occur out of either body, such as some of them in 2020, there was a couple of bills there directed policy, like the development of curriculum, cultural curriculum capability among the teachers, and requiring that as being a licensed teacher for both existing and new teachers. That's a policy issue. That's not necessarily a funding issue, and the localities were given no choice about that. So that's why I defend my use of the word mostly, and I think we probably have an agreement on that.
All right, Mr. Helgeson, talk to us just a little more about, so in the city setting, and this is not universally true, but many cities have a similar situation. So that's different than in the counties and so forth. So, but as councilmen, you guys actually appoint the school board members. They are not elected. And then, so do you give them specific directives, or do their directives and their policy things and everything where they actually give leadership and governance, where does their authority come from?
I guess their authority, once we appoint them, we interview candidates, and a majority of council has to decide who is going to be appointed to the school board. So once they're appointed to the school board, we like to do some vetting ahead of time. And lots of times I'm on the minority end of the city council of who we appoint. With that, you get someone appointed, and then they're kind of off on their own. I can give direction what I think and what I think would be very helpful to improve our educational system. Sometimes they're maybe in the minority, or sometimes they feel that they have to go along with what the superintendent says. So what we do is we appoint, but we also have charge of the purse. And so the purse, using that composite index, we give based on a flat amount. The Virginia General Assembly gives money based on how many students. And we give a flat amount, which is a disincentive actually, because the more decline in enrollment there is, the Virginia General Assembly gives us less because it's per student, but we give a flat amount. And that's something that we ought to try to look at, because we've had a considerable decline in enrollment over the last 15, 20 years in Lynchburg. Lots of them have gone to Bedford County because there's competing school divisions, and some of them are doing a whole lot better than others. And parents have choices. And they said, I'm going to go to either a private school and pay money, or I'm going to go to a neighboring county school. Maybe we move, maybe they send them there. And you see some of the results from our neighboring counties like Bedford and Campbell. Their scores are a whole lot better. Lynchburg, sadly, has gone down because of the fact that there hasn't been as much accountability, I think, as I'd like. Because the whole goal is to improve education. Right. And that demands accountability and making sure we ask some tough questions.
Well said. Mr. Johnson, anything you'd like to add about the local school board and anything else that you specifically want to bring to parents that you haven't already done so?
Sure. Well, first let me just say, we're always happy to get more students from Lynchburg. So, no, one of the important things that we do as school boards, or should be doing, is communicating regularly with our counterpart, the Board of Supervisors, City Council, as the case may be, to let them know what's going on, why, what needs we have, what both intermediate, short-term, and long-term needs. We have a lot of aging buildings, especially in the downstate portion here in Virginia, a lot of maintenance needs that we have. So it's important for our local governing bodies to know what needs we have so that we can be having that conversation, and they can be anticipating what funding challenges might be coming and how to prepare for those, and just really understanding what's going on with education, what classroom needs we have, and things like that. So it can be a true partnership and not an antagonistic relationship as we see it playing out as in some localities around the state.
All right.
Yeah, that relationship, it goes way back, actually. From what I can read and ascertain when the Constitution, these laws were set up, Virginia school boards do not have taxing authority, and that's where the conversation is heading. It's come up from time to time. But just like the U.S. Constitution and the Virginia Constitution, there are a lot of checks and balances in our entire system of governance. And I think that people did a reasonable job, although there's continuing conflict between the boards and the city councils and the school boards about the money and who can control it. But the simple fact is that counties and cities can appropriate the money, and the school board can spend it how they want to. And I can get into details of that, but I see all the heads going up and down. So, but the gentleman is correct. There needs to be more communication between the local money providing city council or county and the school boards. And that has broken down over the years. It depends on personalities of who's elected and who's appointed, and it changes in each jurisdiction every few elections and every turnover and so forth like that. But in a bigger and longer term sense, it is healthy to have different opinions and sort it out. And that's what the voters really do when they elect school boards and boards of supervisors. Now back to the local authority thing for just 1 minute. And to the extent that Virginia is mostly a local authority school setup, this is where we get into the conflict on charter schools and private schools and money that people say the money would follow the student versus going to the local school division. In other words, the parents could take some of their direct aid money and go to private school, church school, wherever they wanted to go. That apparently, even the courts so far, has pretty much stood with the concept that the school board, the local school board, decides that. Now, we've had legislation in Virginia over the last few years to try to change that so that DOE could grant a charter school, or you could have a referendum on it, or whatever. But the way the political divide is in this state now, and has been for the last 14 years at least, I've been in the House of Delegates, no such legislation. We've not been able to pass any such legislation. That's where we are today.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing that up. We're actually going to dig into that a little bit more as we go forward. So, I appreciate you sharing the process, and the different roles of different entities. Hopefully that's been helpful to those who are listening to give them a little better understanding. But as you know, there are many aspects of education in this country that seem to be going off of the rails. Performance is in decline in many states. In public education, failing schools and students are seldom corrected. Government mandates and overreach seem to be increasing. Students are being indoctrinated in social agendas. And far too often, parents are not heard and their wishes are not honored by those in leadership. All right, now you may not agree with me. This is what people are telling me and some of my own observation. Let's talk about this, though. So here's a question. Does state education policy always serve the best interest of its citizens? And when it doesn't, what can be done?
Well, Mr. Adams, I think I agree with most of your points there. It certainly does not, as Virginia has plowed more and more money into failing school divisions such as Richmond and Petersburg and others, and in other parts of the state, the test scores have not improved, period. And what do we do about it? To me, I don't believe we keep adding more money to it because it's not working to throw more money at it. We've got to go back to parenting. We've got to go back to discipline. We've got to have discipline in the schools. And you've got to return to the fundamentals in my mind. This country got where it was by people seeking education to read and write and arithmetic and improve themselves. And 2 + 2 is still 4 in my book, and I have a degree in mathematics. I don't believe I should be challenged in that. That we've got to go back to those fundamentals. So, but the parents are going to have to stand up. And the young adults that know they're not getting an education, they're pretty effective when they come in front of the school board and say, you know, I can't do math now, and I'm in 10th grade. I can't do arithmetic. So we basically have to have an uprising among the citizens that go to the school boards and the local governments and people like me that are in the state government and the governor and everyone else involved and say, look, our system is broke, the test scores are down, in the Commonwealth and compared to other states, and dismal according to other countries across. We look at the test scores internationally. We've got to take the bull by the hands, and it's got to come, I think, bottom up, because that's what happens in other major areas other than foreign policy. If we have a major problem in roads or something else, the people that need to get to work, they rise up and they get a new road built. So the thing is going to have to happen, in my mind, in the education arena. I think the parents are really going to have to stand up and be active, find out what the curriculum is at the local level, elect school board members, elect city council, elect supervisors that listen to their concerns. That's my two.
All right.
You know, one thing is interesting in Lynchburg. We have about 12,500 school-age kids, of which 7,500 of those school-age kids actually use the free public education. That means about 40% who are given the choice of saying, here is a free education, the family and the parents say, keep it. I'm going to take money out of my pocket and spend it elsewhere, whether I go to a neighboring county school, or whether I go to a private school, or whether I take my time and money to teach those children at home. Mm-hmm. When you look at those numbers, that speaks volumes, a whole lot more than our SOL scores, which actually were about 20% below the state average. In mathematics, we got about a 36% SOL scores in mathematics, and the state average is about 54%. When you see those declines in those those numbers of how are they performing, you see parents are saying, keep your free thing. Now, if we did that with anything else, we would say there's some problems. If you could go to a place and get free tires or free dinner and say, I don't want your free tires. I'm going to take money and go elsewhere. How bad does the service or the product have to be, whether it be real or imagined, for 40% to say, keep it? We got some problems. And typically what happens, you know, you look at our higher educational institutions, some of the best in the world, because there's choice, because there's competition. I teach finance and economics. Lots of things are solved because of free choice. And I think lots of things we've districted, and we say you got to go to this school, or here's this and here's that, and we've lost a lot of control because of bureaucracy. And you know, we got to wake up and start saying, how in the world you literally have 40% of the people that have school-age kids say keep it?
Yeah, that's important. And so I think it's also, I mean, it kind of goes back to that opening video. You know, monopolies seldom bring better products and cheaper prices. And just to be honest with you, education, K-12 education in this country is a monopoly. When somewhere between 8 and 9 out of every 10 kids are in a government-run school, that's monopoly. And I think that answers the question all by itself. And I think, Mr. Poindexter, your point is that, you know, parents need to step up and say, look, this is not okay, and either vote with their own wallet or vote in a way where we actually get laws so that the money does follow the students. And, you know, if, you know, well, we've got more questions. Let's keep moving. All right, here's another one.
Could I respond to that one
Yeah,
before we
please.
move on? Yeah. I think the short answer is no. I don't think Richmond not necessarily the General Assembly, but Department of Education always has the best interest at heart. I mean, we look at SOL standards, and this is one thing that I hear a lot from our teachers. There's a lot of topics they would love to be able to cover. Yeah. For instance, when they're discussing the Civil War, they would love to be able to tie in what happened locally during the Civil War. But because of the pacing guides and the SOL standards, it's hard to squeeze in anything that's not given from Richmond. So, I certainly appreciate some of the support that the Department of Ed provides in terms of instructional support and aid and things like that. But it would be great to have more flexibility on those things and to recognize really that all of our students are different. They're all individuals, and they need to be treated as individuals with different learning styles and different abilities. And let's work with each child individually, not just look at them as a cookie cutter and one size is going to fit all. It's like the stocking caps that you sometimes buy at Walmart, and on the picture, everyone that wears it's going to look like a Maine fisherman, and instead you put it on, you look like one of Snow White's 7 dwarves. One size fits all doesn't fit everyone. So I think if we had more local control at the school level, we could better support each individual student.
Right.
Just
Thank you.
One comment on that. I think we're going to have a constitutional amendment to limit some of the governor's powers in Virginia, because in Virginia our Constitution results in our governor being among the 50 states. Virginia is in the top 3 in gubernatorial powers, and that includes appointment powers and discretionary spending and so forth and so on. So we had to change our system of government some to make this work now, and should.
Here's another question. Who should have the ultimate decision-making power over what a child is taught? The parent or the government? And those they hire or appoint over education? Yes, it's a loaded question, but that's what parents are asking.
I guess obviously the parents have the choice. So they have the ultimate choice, and they have the choice to do like 40% of the people did in Lynchburg, as they voted with their feet. Sadly, they're still having to pay for the public education, even though they got to pay elsewhere. But lots of them have said, I don't like this. I don't like either what you're teaching, or I don't like the fact that there's not the discipline in the classroom. When we look at instruction, it really has to require that we have good character of folks, and making sure that there's discipline, and make sure that there's things not just going awry or amiss. We got to make sure our kids are safe and our teachers are safe. And with that requires a good learning environment so all children can learn. Now, I don't agree with there should be an individualized instruction plan for each child. I know that sounds kind of nice, but if we can get back to the basics, if we can get back to first principles, if we can understand Aristotle and Nicomachean ethics and look at the things that have worked for years of how people actually think, rather than saying, oh, well, this textbook had a bad, naughty word in it, so we're going to censor it. These kids can learn. I mean, these kids can have, and they can do a lot more than we give them credit for. Yeah. When we push these kids, I think that can be very helpful.
Very good. Another question. This one comes from an Instagram user. It says, we don't let anyone other than an MD manage our health. Why let unqualified government managed education? Why let unqualified government manage education? So here's the follow-up to kind of help put that in perspective. Who qualifies those who manage education? The voters, the elected representatives, or appointed bureaucrats?
I don't want to keep chiming in, but I'll happy to when the way you ask that. I teach at the college level. I'm not a certified teacher. I never went through all the different K-12 things you have to do, but I'm an expert in my field of finance, and so I can teach that. Sadly, we have these the state standards that say only a licensed teacher can teach K-12. I look in Lynchburg, we got some of the best classical Christian education that these teachers don't have that license. But let me tell you, They teach third graders Greek and Latin. They teach them things that, high school kids in the public school in Lynchburg would never even dream about learning. So some of these punting to the bureaucrat expert, I don't like, because we have an innate understanding, because choices aren't made for somebody, choices are made for us. And that stems from economics, that I pick the best hamburger I want to eat. I pick the best car I want to drive. I should pick the best education for my child as I can get. When it's my choice, it's a much better choice than somebody decides for me.
Anybody else want to weigh in real quick on that?
Well, just very quick, it's mom and dad, and teacher license each year gets something else gets added to it, like the cultural competency, and a lot of that's being added to by influences outside Virginia, and a lot of influences from other parts of Virginia that, to me, don't fit our mode of operations and our traditional education system. So it's just simply, folks, it's time to stand up.
And I think the councilman makes a great point about certifications, because there are a lot of people that have great experience in their field, industry professionals that aren't qualified. They're qualified to do their job, but they're not qualified to teach that to K-12. And we're seeing that now nationwide, a teacher shortage. We cannot get enough teachers. In fact, we can't even get enough substitutes right now to cover a lot of our classes. And if we could open that up and allow more real-world experience into the classroom, not only would that enrich the student experience, but that could also address the teacher shortage that many of us are struggling to fill right now.
Additional thought. I think we have to look at compensation. Okay, a school division cannot hire a good computer scientist or electrical engineer or physicist or career and technical education instructors, etc., and be paid the same as some other disciplines. And if all the school teachers at 10 years make the same, and all of them at 5 years make the same, and all at 15, I propose we go to a merit pay system where the superintendents and the principals are held accountable for ranking and evaluating and scoring each of the teachers and assistants and so forth and so on, and we implement the performance pay. And that will go a long ways towards solving the so-called license problem and bringing the qualified teachers that we really need in our system right now and make them available, because they're just not going to work for the same thing as someone with basket weaving.
Yeah, I think you make a great point together here. One of the challenges we have is that the bureaucracy of education, I'm going to put it in that expression, the bureaucracy of education has regulated our people to death. Our teachers and the people who are the ones who really are there trying to serve our children and teach them, and people who love to teach, people who are gifted, who have those instincts of communicating, drawing out kids and helping them be inspired and get creative in their learning and fall in love with subject content. People like that, unless they are willing to go through all the hoops to meet all of the criteria of the bureaucracy, it is the bureaucracy that is killing us. And it is also, I'm going to say, the bureaucracy and the political side of that bureaucracy that is infusing all of the stuff, the social stuff, that we'll probably talk about here in just a little bit. But that's where that's all getting infused, and it should not be. The bureaucracy should not be managing our education, because bureaucracy are just unelected talking heads who sit around a table and come up with policy that they try to enforce. All right. I didn't want to kill the whole thing here, but
I guess just to add on the delegate, Lynchburg has and their school board, and just like Bedford, you have the ability to pick and choose what you're going to do for compensation. Sadly, when you get a bucket of money that comes from the state and the locality, they can spend that money by hiring lots of extra people, or they can hire fewer people and pay them a whole lot more. Lynchburg has had a long pattern, even in spite of losing thousands of students over the last 20 years. They've had the same number of staff or more. And what that would do is if you could shrink the number of staff because you have a whole lot less SOQ funded positions from the state, you could then pay our teachers that are working in the inner city a whole lot more and compete better. The problem is they just said, well, we've had these people, so we're going to keep them. And we keep them. And that's got to change. And having, the ability to look out, not just have tenure. I don't know why you have tenure, for someone teaching third grade, that you get tenure after 3 years. To me, that seems a little counterintuitive. I do financial planning. I don't keep a customer for life because they've been with me for 3 years. I got to keep serving them. I got to keep making sure they're happy and I'm doing a good job, answering their phone calls and questions and helping. Same thing in the classroom. We have lots of excellent teachers that are trying that, and they get disgusted, and I hear from it a lot, of what they're from the administration or a new thing they're going to do and try this week. So,
next question. So in a time when equity is the term of the day, let's talk about the inequity experienced by parents who choose to remove their child from public education because of its perceived failures, and the government no longer provides funding for their child's educational needs. We've talked a little bit about that, but that seems like exhibit A of inequity, because these are parents, these are people who are paying taxes. So the real question is education a right? There are people who say it's a right. Everybody has a right to an education. Well, then how come if they don't like the education being given, they don't have a right anymore? That's a tough question, I know, but kick it around for a couple minutes.
Well, you're right. That is a tough question. It's not equitable to a mom and dad that want their children to do better and have a better opportunity. And I think I know what the answer is in Virginia. I believe I do. At least my opinion is we have to have some fundamental changes in probably one in the Constitution and certainly in some of the laws in Virginia that actually would allow the money to follow the student. And that, I think, is the ultimate solution. And when you do that, the public schools will be competed against, and they will have to compete back. And so they would improve. The inner city schools, all of them, and I think especially the inner city schools. So it's tough nut. It's not something we're going to solve overnight. But we've got to start the process. We've got to start.
And sadly, when you don't have competition, what you have is everything sinking. Everything is going down. When you have competition, everybody does better. So, what happens lots of times, from my purview, the school board doesn't want to set up a charter school because they look at it as competition. They want to fight against any kind of school choice because it may break the monopoly that is already there. But every monopoly that has ever been created, eventually there's other choices that happen. So no monopoly lasts forever, and eventually that comes crashing down. Do we want it to crash and burn, or do we want to transition into something if we truly care about the education for our students? I read a book a while back from Thomas Sowell and how he understood the education he got in the ghetto in Queens. And he finally had the ability to switch to a school. And he's now a PhD economist that has written 50 books. He's fabulous on about every topic there is known to man. And when you watch that change in education by having the ability to not go to a failing school and being able to choose to go to a private school, and I think they had a charter school. Charter school was set up, there was line waiting, and so competition really helps on lots of facets.
Well, thank you. That's a great transition to our next question. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I did want to jump in on that
Sure.
really quickly. I mean, I think part of it goes back to the very founding of the Republic when Mr. Jefferson first proposed creating a public educational system. He saw the importance and the value of having an educated citizenry, that if we don't have citizens who can read and can reason and think for themselves, self-government is not going to be possible.
Right.
So this is something that, as Virginians, unfortunately, that didn't pass for a number of years, and it really wouldn't be until 1870 that we had a truly public educational system established here in the Commonwealth. But it's been something that at least there's been that recognition from almost the very beginning that this is an absolute necessity for self-government. But one thing is as well, even within the confines of what we're given from Richmond, if school administrators and school boards trust their teachers and allow them to try new things within the flexibility that they have, they can still do really fascinating, innovative, enriching work that enriches students. And so that's something that we've done very successfully here in Bedford County, and that's something I would hope other school divisions would do as well. Unleash the creative potential of your teachers and just see how the students can grow in that environment.
Very good. So you were talking about charter schools. Charter schools essentially are essentially privately managed but publicly funded schools, and they are flourishing in most states. This is a viable school choice alternative to parents, especially those in failing school districts, as charter schools must demonstrate high performance or they get shut down, unlike standard public schools, which is talked about failing schools, and we just keep dumping money into them endlessly. So here's the question. Why do states like Virginia have such archaic policies toward charter and other innovative alternatives? I know the answer. You spoke about it briefly, but hit on that quickly again. And what do we have to do to change that? How do we go about that?
It's just simply a matter of political will to change the system, and the people have to demand that we do that. And when that happens, it'll get changed, and we can correct it. That it's too much outside money, too much outside influences, too many. And now in Virginia, we're going to have teachers with labor unions starting 1 July. In Virginia, a local board can decide to unionize the teacher workforce or the janitor workforce or anything else. And that effort's not being led out of Virginia, it's being led out of the Northeast, okay? We've got to take our own state back and do it and handle our own affairs, and probably part of that's taking money out of the election cycle from out-of-state interest or limiting it or something like that. So some fundamental changes. We're just going to have to stand up and take our Commonwealth back.
Okay, so we're running a little short on time here, so I'm going to move to the next question. There's a strong push in education to teach race theory, pitting so-called races against each other based on skin color. There is really just one race. It's called the human race. Children don't see racial distinctions. So why are we allowing anything to be taught that puts those ideas into their heads?
One, it shouldn't be. I mean, because of the fact that, I think everybody has now discerned that affirmative action was a failure because it was actually instituting racism. It's saying even though you may not be qualified, you're going to fulfill this slot because of the fact of your certain race. Back to Thomas Sowell, which I hate to quote him another time, he used to teach at Stanford, or Cornell rather. When he was at Cornell, they started implementing and putting in students that were black over other students. And he said he's a black economist, and he's teaching them, he's wondering, why are they failing so much? And he looked back and realizes because they filled him in a quota. They gave him an opportunity more than they would have. They would have been extremely successful at another school, but they failed out of Cornell. And he was wondering why. And what it's that same thing is because you actually put people in a box that you said, because you're black, you can't learn on your own, so therefore we got to help you. That is rotten. And so anytime that we try to teach any type of racism, that is completely counter to just any normal thing. You know, people aren't looking at, I used to coach wrestling actually at Bedford County, and when you have that, you have white kids, black kids, they're my wrestlers. They're my kids. And so anytime we do that, all it's doing is a method of division and calling you somebody versus him. We need to come together.
Yeah, I agree with the gentleman. And going back to Jefferson and the foundation of this country, it was founded on equal opportunity and equality and those things. And this is all political. There's a political agenda in this country and in this state now, especially in this state in the last 4 or 5 years. And people have to wake up and just understand what it is, and that it's totally foreign to look at anybody on a race basis. That we give every child we can the very best equality of opportunity to get that education. And mom and dad's got to help. And that's where we got to go. Totally inappropriate.
Okay, let's go to the next question. So there is a very popular expression these days. The word is reimagine. While there is a need to try to think through critical areas in fresh ways, there is a marked difference between imagination and reality. For example, as a kid growing up, I'd listen to ball games, and my imagination had me the MVP. There we go. MVP of the Super Bowl, or whatever it was. Look, that was imagination, but it was a long ways from reality. And I think in real life, so let's go this route. So to reimagine scientific realities doesn't alter them. So you know where I'm going here. We're talking about gender transformation, gender confusion, however you want to express that. It's a political hot button right now, but the science is just not there. And so we can reimagine stuff, but is it healthy to promote imagination over reality?
Well, I think one thing that we've always tried to do is support each student, protect each student. And so we have, at least in Bedford County, for years, we have had students that don't conform to traditional gender roles. And so we've always tried to work with those students and their families on a case-by-case basis and make sure that they are getting the services that they need and respecting their rights and their privacy along with the rights and privacy of other students. And I see that many schools in Virginia will continue to do that.
Sure. And I think that's important. We should always respect people. That's not really the focus here, though. I'm talking about where we are providing instruction in those kinds of things. That's what I'm talking about, where these things become mandated instruction and promoted to our children. There are many, many, many parents that are irate about that because they feel like it is not healthy for their children, and it is completely contrary to what they are trying to teach them at home. So how do we fix that? Is that just another political thing that has to be overcome, or what's the reality there? And how can parents be engaged in practical ways to express what they want?
One thing that's been sad is the fact that when you see a political movement that happens, like, for example, George Floyd, and then you look at people thinking, oh, well, I'm helping the repressed. And when that happens, people aren't then thinking logically. They're not looking at facts like you're wearing a gray suit. And I could call that blue, but it's not. I mean, I can say that, but then I'm either a liar just because I'm patterning what you happen to say, and that's wrong. Because we need to be honest with things, whether it be factual, whether it be about gender, whether it be about race. We need to be factual on everything because our kids are seeing this. And what's happened is because you have this political push, people think, oh, well, we got to now watch out for the, it's not even a 1%. You're looking at a fraction of 0.1% that now we got to conform all policies to. And when you're looking at public education, that means we got to make all the children learn. I mean, at least you're not going to have an individualized plan, but you want to have the most number of children learn. And if we're now focusing on only that one disruptive student or only somebody that wants to do something completely different, that really hinders education. And we need to have our teachers want to focus on education. They do not want to have to focus on calling you ma'am today and, sir tomorrow. They want to understand that there's things, not just because what you want to feel or think today. There's facts, there's science, there's biology, there's chromosomes, there's lots of things, and we need to stand up and say, we can't just play anymore. This is real, and we're trying to teach kids to learn.
Okay, the clock says we should be done. But I have two more questions, if you'll indulge me, and hopefully our audience will as well. Let's talk a little bit about mask mandates, because that's another thing that a lot of parents are very frustrated about. It is every child's right to receive a public education, or is it? I guess we should ask. And what about districts where students are being expelled because parents disagree with the mask mandates, or districts who are segregating students, putting them off in rooms or gyms or whatever, and basically leaving them unattended and uneducated because they are not accommodating the mask mandate?
Well, in my view, the federal government and the Commonwealth of Virginia's government has totally failed in its handling of the efficacy of masks. It's totally failed to tell us how many youngsters have really had the COVID virus. It's failed to tell us how many of those youngsters have actually been in the hospital or where, and so forth. So the data gathering and a presentation to the parents, to me as an elected official or these other gentlemen or anyone, we don't really know. And when people don't really understand what's going on, they're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
So I've got quite a background in statistics, probability, and all that kind of thing. And I can't find the studies. I can find the one that CDC relied on when they changed their most recent guidance. They did a study in Georgia on masks, and they came out with themselves with their own study in 355 schools, divisions, that the use of masks versus unmasked in schools, there was no tangible difference, and yet they changed the guidance. Something is not right, and until that's righted, we're going to have a problem.
And I think most things are done as a political football. It has nothing based on science. I mean, they talked about masks a long time ago. The CDC used to, but they pulled those guidelines, which said that a surgical mask is good for 30 minutes and in a sterile environment. These masks that are hung on your rearview mirror or in the bus or putting on and taken off for hours of the day at the school has no efficacy. And so then they talked about the N95s and they went all on all these things. But with it, what it's done is actually teaches these kids to fear others. That's the worst part. Yeah. It's now these children, these young children that are thinking their friend are now, you're my friend, but you're not wearing a mask. Right. So you're trying to kill me. So now you're my friend, but not anymore. Yeah. The fear that it puts in these children is rotten. It's going to have long-term effects. That's why last year our schools, they didn't meet in person, they had mask mandates, and the SOLs plummeted. All our good teachers knew that was going to happen. 75% of our teachers in Lynchburg said, don't do this, it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
But they listened to this small percentage of the teachers union, and they ended up imposing those onerous laws, and the kids suffered tremendously, and they're going to suffer for a long time.
One thing, at least here in Virginia, in the summer, we had a brief window when localities could choose, do we require masks, do we not? And then we got the public health order from the state that basically took away that flexibility for local school divisions, and that's why you saw county after county after county, even in very conservative parts of the state, backing off and requiring masks. So that seems like certainly something that if parents are concerned, those are concerns that the governor's office and others in Richmond need to hear.
But I think back to your first questions, though, that you had, the local control. The local control isn't by some fiat, by some dictator. It's not based on somebody just saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. It's the legislative body that enacts legislation, not just somebody that's sitting on their high horse and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do today. Because it's, and I wish local school boards would say, no, we're not going to do this. And I granted, I recognize it's a precarious position, but to say we're not going to do that because we care so much and we love our children. We love them to learn and be educated, and this is counterproductive for what they're doing. And I wish they would say, nope, we have local control based on what you've read about the state constitution.
Section 7.
Absolutely. Say no.
Just a final thought on that. Remember, our system is set up to say no. I mean, that's why we have the judiciary, gentlemen, okay, to resolve these disputes. So there's no reason in the world that school boards or any other organization can't say no to this mandate and say, okay, Governor or whoever, take me to court, or I'm taking you to court over it, and we'll just see what happens. And people are afraid to do that, apparently. And I know the polls are running just slightly over 50% for mask and slightly below 50 against them, but we forget that the courts will bring some manner of truth and fact and process to the decision making. And it happens every day. I mean, I'm sworn to an oath, you gentlemen are as well. But that doesn't say we can agree and just go along with the laws and dictates. It says that, yeah, we're supposed to, but if we object to them, our system says we have the right and the duty to go to the judiciary. And I'm a little disappointed that some people have not been willing to take that step. It can work both ways.
Yeah. Very good. So last question. So when things, and this is really for families, for parents and for educators, for anybody that's listening, when things are going wrong in education, how can citizens, but especially parents, engage to ensure the problems get fixed in their schools? So I'd like us, we're going to just go quickly through each one of you, and let's start with Mr. Johnson this time. Talk directly to parents. Look, you're frustrated with what's going on in schools, so here's how you can get involved that will make a difference.
Absolutely. I think it depends largely on what problem parents are experiencing. First stop is always at your child's school. Talk to your child's teacher. Talk to the principal. What's going on? How can I help? How can I support and make this a better, more enriching environment for my child? If it's something that's within local control, talk to your school board representative, talk to your county's or your city's superintendent. Work at that level. If it's something that's a much higher level, much more macro level, talk to your delegate, talk to your state senator, write the governor's office. There's so many different levels, and depending on what kind of problem it is, there are lots of people along the way that can talk to you, support you, hear your concerns, or guide you as to who else could help support that.
And so as the chairman of the board or as a board member, if somebody came and spoke to you, they had a concern and that really needed to be addressed somewhere else, you could and would help coach them and take them by the hand and help them, partner with them to try to solve that problem. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely. Share with them other individuals that could help them navigate this challenge.
Okay, thank you. Same question. Talk to the parents. And what can they do what do they need to do?
Absolutely. A lot of our parents this last year, which never used to show up for school board member or meetings, they've showed up in droves because of the fact that they're concerned about whether it be critical race theory or transgender policy or having schools that were actually just not in person but distance, then the mask policy. With that, they've come and showed up in droves to our school board meetings. They've actually now become a lot more engaged because city council appoints those members. They're going to be showing up at the polls. So you parents, make sure you show up at the polls. Ask questions. Ask questions of your representatives and make sure that you don't get a fluff answer, because lots of times people love to just give you little fluff answers. And we had a superintendent that always just talked about every child by name and by need. And he was really concerned about his compensation and his actual personal enrichment. It didn't help every child by name and by need. It was a good little slogan, but actually we want more than slogans. We want to see fruit on the tree. We want to make sure there's something real behind it rather than a catchy slogan. Politicians are good at catchy slogans, and use discernment and actually make sure that this is what you really, you're going to have somebody that's accountable and demand accountability.
Well, certainly for certain, say, I'll call them more minor problems, the teacher, the principal, and so forth, that's where you start. But we're talking about broader and significant problems in education here today. So when we get past those levels of problems, it's just like I think we all agree. It starts with the parent, and the parent should be going not just to the school board meeting. Okay, you engage with your school board member at the convenience store, or call them at home, or whatever. Make personal contact there, and then the other school board members and the supervisors and the town council, and if you think it's at the state level as well, and these are state level issues as well, then you contact your, as you said, your delegates and your senators and the governor. But we have to get a little bit out of jurisdiction too. We need to, if we have a lot of friends that live over in Roanoke, we need to call them up. If we have friends that live in Northern Virginia, we need to call them every night for a week, okay? Because Virginia's under the thumb of Northern Virginia right now. I'm going to tell you the way it is. And don't forget the press, okay? You can do social media and all that kind of things too, but write letters to the editor. Okay, to the Richmond Times-Dispatch, okay, not just to local papers, because they all run by somebody else now and won't publish local news anyway. Most of them, my district won't. So get vocal, but be nice about it. Be polite. This is a problem. I want it fixed. I'm a parent. I'm a taxpayer. I expect the system to be changed. So we've got to do all of those things, in my opinion.
Well, that's great advice, and thank you so much, panel, for your time with us here tonight, for speaking to these questions. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your service in your particular roles, and we wish you Godspeed as you continue your work. Also want to thank all of our viewers tonight. We'd love to hear from you, maybe on Facebook or maybe through our through email. info@nwef.org. If you have any thoughts, if you have any feedback, if you have any questions you'd like to address further, please feel free to engage us. We encourage you to go to nwef.org and sign up for our updates there. There's a lot of information, a lot of blogs that come out, a lot of helpful resources for you on many issues. Noah Webster Educational Foundation, we focus on 5 big stones, key areas: the role of instruction in education, the role of parents, the role of government, which we talked about tonight, the role of faith and morality, and the role of facilities. So these are the 5 big things that we talk about. Our next roundtable discussion is going to be on Thursday, October 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That topic is going to be the role of faith and morality in education. So please put it on your calendars. We hope you will join us. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and good night.